Did I ever tell you the definition of mid? Hello everyone, my name is Michael. Most people call me Pseudo, and if you know even a little bit about anime, then you might have heard of a fun little show called My Hero Academia, a show that's become widely regarded as baby's first anime due to how well it acts as a gateway into the medium. And gotta say, pretty accurate. Simplistic but likable characters, a fairly straightforward plot, at least at first, great animation, banger music, they even prepare you for the huge abundance of sexualized minors.
How old is that
like,
third one?
They're all the same age.
What are they?
I think they're like 14.
Okay, alright.
If you couldn't already tell, I'm a massive fan. So much so that I made 2 whole videos on it that I still stand by to this very day.
I had read the manga since even before the anime was made.
That was not a signal to play my video. You are embarrassing me. Okay, look, I'll stop being a dickhead. I don't like this show. Not anymore, at least. I went from a hardcore enthusiast to a critical fan before circling all the way back to becoming a straight-up hater. A ruthless cycle, I know. I need actual problems. As much as I wish I could point to a specific instance that just ruined the entire show for me, it just really isn't that simple. Because my opinion didn't take an immediate 180 because of a singular moment, but more so it was just a culmination of several small issues that continued to pile up until eventually reached a point where I just couldn't be bothered to read chapters anymore. Egregiously undercooked storylines, contradicting its own themes and messages, shoving large percentage of its cast to the sideline, and retrospectively speaking here, one of the worst war arcs I have ever read in my life. Unfortunately, retreading most of these issues seem redundant considering the fact that I've already made 2 whole videos on the matter, and my opinion honestly hasn't really changed all that much apart from small stuff like the character design tangent I went on for some reason.
Allow me to impose a different question then. Why are some of the characters designed like Tumblr art?
Riveting point, Pseudo, you fucking loser. Here's the thing though, despite the bitter way I parted with the actual series, it doesn't change the fact that there was still a point in time where I was a fan and experienced genuine joy while watching it. The same cannot be said for the movies produced by this franchise. Anime movies in general are not something I typically vibe with because I don't think the majority of anime creators know how to tell a short story without overloading the entire thing with pointless fluff. And while there are instances where absolute cinema is being created, the majority of the stuff that comes out is either painfully mediocre or abysmally dogshit. I'm not sorry. As you can probably guess, My Hero Academia was no exception to this. I watched every single one of these movies pretty much as soon as each of them came out, and even when I was a huge fan of this series, I don't remember particularly liking any of these films. In fact, I think the first movie was pretty much the thing that made me start questioning, is this show really as good as I think it is? But that being said, I've only watched each movie 1 time, and frankly, I can't even remember what some of them are about. So because of that, I thought it'd be fun to go through all the films in one singular video and give my current thoughts on each of them. Sit down. Let's just jump right into it. My Hero Academia 2 Heroes is the series' first ever movie that was released in July of 2018, around the same time season 3 was airing 7 years ago. Holy shit, I think I just felt my bones rattle. The story takes place on Island, a floating city where a huge exhibition for the latest state-of-the-art hero items is taking place. All Might, being the #1 hero, just so happened to receive a special invitation by his old friend David Shield, who basically runs the entire place as the head scientist. Having received permission to bring along one guest, Deku tags along with his mentor and they both head off to the expo where All Might reunites with David and his daughter Melissa Shield. While All Might is catching up with his old friend, Melissa shows Deku around the island. During the tour, they run into several other members of Class 1A who somehow found their way onto this super exclusive expo through various different means, and they just so coincidentally happen to comprise of some of the most popular characters of the cast. Wow, that's convenient. I'm sure their inclusion was definitely for plot purposes and not just ticket bait. Hooray, the gang's all here!
I like money!
Unfortunately, what was supposed to be a fun event goes completely in flames when the whole shebang is interrupted by a terrorist group being led by a notorious villain, a man named Wolfram, who wants to steal all the cool tech for himself. He's also voiced by Keith Silverstein. Before we get into the nitty-gritty though, I think it's important to address something right off the bat. These movies are canon. Yes, I'm well aware they're meant to just serve as fun, standalone side stories that shouldn't be taken too seriously, but Horikoshi himself has gone out of his way to confirm that these films are connected to the main series. He didn't have to do this, he could have just gone the Naruto/Dragon Ball route and just say, yeah, this is all just a cool what-if scenario. Unfortunately, he didn't. This is part of the timeline now, which means that they're bound by canon rules and events, which means I'm allowed to judge and critique them based on that standard, and you can't get mad at me. Now, as a whole, there's not really too much to say about this film because it's pretty much as bare bones as you could possibly get. Let's talk about David and Melissa first. I'll just be frank here, Melissa is easily the more compelling one out of the two because the movie actually gives her a lot of things to do despite being a non-combatant, such as giving Izuku custom tech for his quirk, helping the UA students sneak through during the the villain attack, and she even gets a neat little appearance in the manga where she designs the All Might armor during the last few arcs. Plus, I really like her interactions with the cast. I think she has a very likable personality, and her interactions with them show that they have some decent chemistry with each other. All things considered, a very solid addition. Unfortunately, her father David, on the other hand, yeah, he kinda just sucks. I'll cut the movie some slack considering the fact that they obviously didn't have time to flesh out their relationship, but that doesn't change the fact that the so-called friendship between him and All Might feels paper thin. I just don't really buy the idea that this dude played such a pivotal role in All Might's origin because their friendship feels incredibly inorganic. All Might had never talked about or even so much as mentioned the guy until this movie came out. They weren't even close enough for All Might to tell him he's passed on One for All to Midoriya, so I'm sorry, I just don't buy it. This is made even worse from the fact that he does almost nothing the entire film. He's hyped up as this big shot scientist, but we don't see him do anything all that great or useful. Not even during the climax, his own daughter was more of an asset than him. All we got from this dude was like 2 flashbacks that felt incredibly forced in to try and create some kind of illusion that these two are close. A quick scene of him scanning All Might, and then that's it. Bam, he's a traitor all of a sudden. Like, okay, you weren't even all that interesting to begin with, my guy. I'm not exactly heartbroken. I wouldn't go so far as to say he was a horrible character, but I don't think he works as an important extension of All Might's backstory. And I think even Horikoshi figured that out because he only shows up again in a spin-off chapter. He's so fucking lame, he wasn't even allowed to appear in the main series. They honestly could have just replaced both him and Melissa with some random faceless scientist during the later arcs and it wouldn't have changed the story of the manga in the slightest. Melissa was just popular enough with the audience to be given a quick little callback. But aside from that though, there really isn't much else I can say about this movie. The Class 1A characters were pretty good. I did imply earlier that their inclusion felt a little bit forced to draw in more tickets, but the film was able to utilize them in a way where each of them felt useful but not steal the entire spotlight away from the main focuses, which were Deku and All Might. The animation is straight up great. I think at the time these were the most dynamic fight scenes we had ever gotten from this series, and they pulled absolutely no punches with the action. That final fight where Izuku and All Might were running together side by side was honestly both epic and hilarious due to how goofy it looks. The villain was fine, nothing special, just the straight up selfish evil bad guy who wants to do bad things for the sake of it, but he plays it well and serves his purpose as a small time antagonist. I will say though, him being connected with All for One did feel a little tacked on, to be honest. I feel like they had to do that because it was the only way to justify this random shitter being able to go toe to toe with not just All Might but Izuku at the same time. Overall, the movie wasn't great, but I wouldn't call it offensively bad or anything. It's kind of just... it doesn't really add too much to the overall series, but it doesn't ruin anything from it either. It is a movie that exists. I don't see myself ever going back to watch this again now that I've got my video out of it. Remember when I said I was allowed to judge these based on canon rules and standards? 1 year, roughly just a little over 1 year after the first movie released with unsurprisingly positive reception, the producers clearly saw a chance to continuously make quick and easy cash, and immediately got to work on pumping out the next theatrical release. Because as the MCU has taught us, routine annual releases was an absolutely brilliant idea. Not even being sarcastic about that. You can talk about how horrible the Marvel films got all you want, but at the end of the day, the profits speak for themselves. I can't really even blame the higher-ups at Studio Bones for trying to follow in their footsteps. It's just the most logical course of action as a business. Doesn't change the fact that this film is not very good, all things considered. To be clear, I still don't think I'd go so far as to call it bad, but I have a significantly higher number of issues when it comes to the creative decisions they chose to take, primarily when it comes to the writing. That being said, let's start with the positives first.
Positive mental attitude, you gotta keep it with you at all times!
Once again, the animation is absolutely stellar. It's even better than the first film, so they definitely didn't cheap out in that department. I was especially impressed by just how vibrant and beautiful the backgrounds were. The movie takes place in some kind of rural island in the countryside, and it would have been so easy to cut corners, but they clearly put a lot of effort into making the environment stand out and really pop, which is commendable, especially when you consider how tight their schedules were since they most likely had to work on this flick alongside the production of Season 4. Oh, don't worry, we'll touch on that in a bit. Aside from that, the music was really good as usual. Yuki Hayashi never fails to pump out absolute bangers. The symphony during the final fight mixed with the flashy animation was absolute cinema. My deep-fried brown mush of a brain was thoroughly stimulated by the action sequences, despite how much the context behind some of them kind of pissed me off. I also really like the entire Class 1A working together here. They've always had great chemistry, and this film really does a good job of showcasing just how well they all work together as a unit. Pretty much each and every one of them got a chance to shine in a significant capacity, and there was never at any point where I felt somebody was just a worthless addition. And that about wraps up pretty much every good thing I have to say, so now for the script. The plot goes as such. Following the retirement of All Might, villains have gotten more and more bold in a very short amount of time, which has resulted in the percentage of crime to increase dramatically. Due to this, UA and a bunch of other hero institutions have decided to step up their efforts in training the next generation by sending them all out to do fieldwork. Class 1A in particular have been sent out to the previously mentioned Nabu Island and will essentially act out as temporary local security until they can find the time to assign actual pro heroes to be stationed there. Unfortunately, the place gets attacked by a group of powerful villains and the students now have to stop them from destroying the place. Blah blah blah, you get the picture. Plot summary over, here's why it didn't work for me. For starters, the villain is an absolute piss baby, and I hate him to an almost vitriolic degree. His whole entire shtick is that he's been persecuted his entire life because he was born with a strong quirk, so he's now set himself on a path of mass genocide in order to create a world where the strong rule over the weak, because he believes the current society runs on the exact opposite philosophy, which is just not true. Like, this is My Hero Academia. Literally the only thing that does matter is strength. It's one of the biggest things people criticize this show about in regards to the world building, you fucking loser. Thankfully, the movie doesn't try to paint him in a sympathetic light or anything of the sort, because him just being wrong is one thing, but God forbid they have the gall to say he has a point in any capacity. However, when you take the series' overall writing into account, I have a strong suspicion that this was more of a miracle achieved through time constraint rather than a deliberate choice not to include more backstory for him. Plus, the movie not coddling him doesn't make him any less insufferable to watch. The only cool thing about this guy is his powers. Other than that, his motivations and personality both suck ass. I can respect the attempt at trying to have a villain with a little more depth compared to the first film, but they just plainly missed the mark with this guy. He's just all for one but with embarrassingly less aura. I'm sorry, this design is dog shit. I can accept not being intimidating, but he looks downright goofy. One of his minions looks 10 times more of a final boss than him. Another problem I have is just the entire setup as a whole, specifically the idea of sending first-year students to an island on their own to work as heroes. This is an issue that I always had with some of the later parts of the main series as well. Why the hell are they giving jobs like this to literal first years in high school? Don't get me wrong, I get it, this is an inherently dangerous line of work they've signed up for, and it is important to put them through the ringer to make sure they'd be ready for the real world. But come on, there are steps to this, man. There's only 2 first-year classes. You couldn't spare 2 teachers to send for each of them? The unsupervised work should have been left to the second and third years. You know, the ones closer to actually graduating and going off professionally. This is like if in Naruto the Genins were the one leading the counterattack during the invasion of the Leaf Village. Or if you need a more in-universe hypothetical, this would be like bringing along first-year students to help you invade the hideout of one of the biggest villain organizations in the world. Oh wait, they actually did that in the main series. Where the f*** are the upperclassmen? Why are you bringing trainees, literal not even rookies yet, to a full-on FBI raid? This is stupid and irresponsible, but it's never treated as stupid and irresponsible in the story, so we're meant to believe this is just the logical thing to do. And then there's the final battle. Oh god, kill me. There's 2 major problems I have with giving Bakugo one for all. Okay, no, there's way more than 2, but these are the most important ones to bring up. Brace yourselves. I'm about to go full nerd emoji. 1. The quickness of it. I can totally accept that Bakugo is better at handling one for all immediately, considering how naturally strong he is. But him being able to just use it the very moment it was given to him directly breaks the rules set within the show. At the beginning of the series, it took Deku literal hours before he could even start using the power. In fact, it was even explicitly stated that it takes roughly 2 or 3 hours for the quirk to transfer, so what's going on here, buddy? The second is how it was given to him, because what the hell is this shit? Deku literally had to swallow an entire strand of hair for the quirk to get transferred. Meanwhile, in the movie, they touch tips? Where is the DNA transfer? The fucking germs on their hands? Even if you make the argument that maybe his blood went into Bakugo's hand through the wounds or some shit, that still doesn't explain how quick the transfer was. He got way less DNA being injected into himself, yet he was able to use the quirk way quicker than Izuku ever was. Either the rules are insanely conveniently flexible depending on the situation, or Izuku really just sucks. Insert one for all should have gone to Mirio rant here.
But Sudo, it's not that deep, bro. You're molding.
Yeah, I know. If I don't give a shit about the rules, then I'm an illiterate shonen brain dumbass. And if I do care about the rules, then I'm an overly critical, pretentious douche, right? Either way, with all this being said, you might reasonably come to the conclusion that I completely despise this movie, right? No, from a purely personal enjoyment perspective, this was an enjoyable film. It was still entertaining the entire way through, and it never left me with the feeling of boredom, and if you ask me, that's enough for a film not aiming to be super deep or complex. That being said, there were significant fumbles in the writing department, as I've already laid out, and I can't just completely ignore it. Would I watch it again, though? Yeah, sure, why not? There's definitely worse things you could make me watch, such as... World Hero's mission is a prime example of what happens when a studio gets greedy and tries to tackle too many things at once. And this statement isn't directed necessarily at the contents of the film itself, but the horrendous production blunders leading up to it. Before it even had a chance to come out, the movie already had a lot of things working against it as a result of Studio Bones' poor handling of priorities. For starters, it released pretty much smack dab in the middle of Season 5, and while it's not abnormal for these films to come out at the same time period as a season, this was the first time this actually negatively affected the main series to a significant degree. This was the period where complaints about the anime were at its most prevalent, from its downgrade in animation, rearranging of story arcs, to straight up cutting out content from the manga which included vital character moments. Up until this point, I don't think anybody had much of a real problem with these films. They weren't masterpieces by any stretch, but they were seen as nice little extra pieces of content meant as a treat for the audience to complement the main series. But Studio Bones seemed to not understand that, so rather than putting focus on adapting one of the most anticipated arcs from the manga, it instead seems like they chose to prioritize production of the third film, which isn't even meant to be all that significant to the overall story, because these films, despite being canon, are isolated, inconsequential side quests. This in turn left a pretty sour taste in people's mouths, and caused a fair bit of resentment to be directed at the film, and it wasn't even worth it in the end because this movie was fucking ass. The story here is as straightforward as you can possibly get, even more so than the previous films. A religious terrorist group known as the Humorize has been causing mass havoc throughout the world because they believe quirks are a blight to humanity, and anyone who possesses one needs to be cleansed off the face of the planet. This notorious group has hidden quirk activation bombs all throughout the world in various different countries, and if they are ever set off, it'll kill pretty much everyone who has a quirk and standing in the area of the chemicals being released. Thus, it becomes a race against time on whether our heroes can bring down these villains before the scheduled gassing. That's it, that's the whole entire plot. It's easily the most brain-dead story out of all the movies so far, and the producers seem painfully aware of that because they waste pretty much zero time in just throwing you straight into the action. In less than 7 minutes of the film beginning, my eyes were immediately assaulted with action scene after action scene containing so much visual vomit. I might as well have been watching the Memeverse by Robin Sick. That was a very terminally online statement. I don't know if that's still funny to mention or not. I might have just sounded like a dementia-ridden old man right there. This movie is just... I honestly don't even know what to say about it. It's like asking me to reach into a bag of chips and expecting me to give a detailed critique regarding the intricacies of the flavor. It's junk food. It's either bland at best or just outright shit at worst. But the best thing to do for yourself is probably just not consume it at all. The plot is bare bones, the villains are pretty much as one-dimensional as you can possibly get, and not even in a fun way despite essentially being genocidal Nazis. Like, come on, those are supposed to be some of the most fun kind. How do you make an evil pope boring? They couldn't even be bothered to establish a smaller, more prominent selection of big bads. They just added in last-minute extra strong minions out of nowhere so that they could have a huge climactic battle at the end. And you might be saying, but Pseudo, aren't you essentially the CEO of loving simple, straightforward action shows? Yes, I am. But there's a difference between being simple and straight up having nothing else to offer. Yeah, the explosions and action sequences are nice, the fights are still technically good, don't get me wrong, but if that's literally all you have to offer in the entertainment department for an entire hour and 45 minutes, then don't be surprised when I get desensitized to it when we're 3 movies deep at this point. This is the exact same problem that other series like the Jujutsu Kaisen manga eventually fell into. And no, I'm not making a follow-up video on that. It's even more infuriating when you remember the context I gave you earlier. You butchered one of the most interesting arcs of the manga for this? Another basic-ass movie with just as much, if not even less substance than the previous two? I was practically falling asleep by the halfway point. It was either just basic big explosion action scenes or some of the most boring interactions you could possibly get out of this specific cast of characters. That's a pretty good transition to talk about this dude real quick. So for context, Deku is stationed out in a foreign country, and about a quarter of the way through the movie, he gets acquainted with a petty criminal after chasing him down for a robbery, but through various circumstances, they both get framed for mass murder and now have to run from the authorities, turning this film into a semi-road movie. This wouldn't be so bad if not for the fact that this person... Hold on, what's he called again? Rhodey. His name is Rhodey. I don't like him. Admittedly, it's kind of hard to explain why. Essentially, everything about this character just rubbed me the wrong way. His design, his personality, his painfully predictable sob story, everything about him just screams really bad OC from fanfiction. I was not in any way, shape, or form invested in his character whatsoever, and his inclusion into the story makes him seem more like a plot device more than anything. On top of that, his interactions with Deku were either boring at best or outright infuriating at worst, because he is a smug jackass, and Izuku is too much of a goody goody two-shoes to punch him in the face for it. But once Izuku finally wins him over, he just kind of becomes a really boring, uninteresting companion. Their friendship just doesn't really do anything for me. Overall, this was a rough one to get through, and I really don't have much else to say about it. This film is not worth your time, and I myself am certainly never gonna watch this ever again. Thankfully though, that's the last one. Yep. That's it. We're done. There is absolutely no other film to talk about for this video. Oh, for fuck. Fast forward to another 3 years, oh my god, a normal gap. That third movie actually did hurt you a bit, didn't it? Two Heroes is the fourth and currently latest My Hero Academia movie that came out during the latter half of last year. Timeline-wise, it takes place around a little bit after the Dark Hero arc, one of the most overrated arcs in the entire series if you asked me. But then again, anytime I hear someone call anything in My Hero Academia dark, I can't help but picture that SpongeBob roller coaster image. Izuku and the rest of Class 1A have been stationed to a ruined city where villains are running around rampant until they're eventually alerted about a kidnapping of a girl named Anna, in which case they all quickly move to intercept. Unfortunately though, they end up coming to blows with one of the biggest crime syndicates in the entire world when they discover that the ones after the girl is actually the leader of said group, a man who's masquerading as the symbol of peace, Dark Might. That's right, we've now officially gotten to a point where they're doing the color palette swap and having an evil All Might appear on screen. This premise was immediately met with skepticism. I remember hearing about the movie for the first time through a Twitter post months back, and the first thing I saw was people mocking it, and honestly, I can't really blame them. The past 3 movies range from either pretty bad to painfully mid, and by this point it's been almost 3 years since the third film, and the fourth one seemed to be parading around a plot that was doomed to fail. People like me, who were already sick of this shit, did not have high expectations in the slightest. It was looking bleak. But nonetheless, the film eventually came out, and what did I think?
I liked it.
I'll be damned. I say this with no exaggeration. Not only is My Hero Academia Your Next not a bad film, but it's actually a gigantic step up from previous installments. In fact, I'd even go so far as to say it's a genuinely very well put together movie that plays extremely well into these series' strengths while also making full use of new, interesting, and creative ideas that all blend seamlessly together to tell an actual compelling story. I am legitimately surprised. This is a really good movie. Easily the best one that they have ever made in terms of story and production. The characters in particular are at their absolute best here. The decision to bring back and focus on Class 1A was a fantastic choice because let's face it, these are the cast of people we as viewers have gotten to know the most and have grown most attached to. Of course, main roles are going to be assigned to the big 3, but they once again do an amazing job of assigning supporting roles to the other members of the class that make them feel vital to the actual plot. And one thing I can commend about this and the previous movie is that the pro heroes are utilized in a practical way, participating in fights, evacuating the citizens. They're actually doing important shit instead of just being absent for most of the runtime and then showing up at the end to clean up the mess. In addition to established characters receiving the respectful treatment they deserve, this is also probably the best lineup of movie original characters by a long shot from both sides of the spectrum. Julio is a legitimately interesting character whose cold, polite, but sassy demeanor blends excellently with Deku's good-natured heroism. Their strikingly different but surprisingly compatible personalities actually created a really fun dynamic of him just being unabashedly blunt and ruthless while Izuku gets increasingly exasperated by his attitude. Their interactions were incredibly entertaining and I enjoyed their friendship far more than the one with that loser in the last film. On top of that, Julio's relationship with Anna is genuinely compelling. The movie does a really good job of establishing their history, helping us understand just how personal and strong their bond is, despite the fact that they spent the majority of the film apart from each other. I actually felt sad seeing them separated and found myself actively rooting for them to take down the villain so that they could reunite and finally be together. Izuku's also really good in this film. I legitimately really enjoyed him as a protagonist. For some ungodly reason, he is just locked in this film. Like, he still has goofiness, but every time he sees Dark Might, it's just on sight. He hates this dude. Look at this shit. I have never seen him hit this combo on anyone.
Virginia! North Carolina! Alabama! Tennessee! Oklahoma! Arkansas! Minnesota!
Speaking of villains though, Dark Might is fucking brilliant, man. I love this dude. The idea of a psychotic, schizophrenic mafia boss interpreting All Might's final words as a message to himself is actually the funniest thing I've heard in a while. And seeing him be so shamelessly violent, malicious, and downright comically evil was so unbelievably fun. He's a villain who's both intimidating but also has an actual entertaining personality, which was a breath of fresh air compared to the past 2 movies of just blah blah power, blah blah quirk bad. Can you believe this? A grown-ass grown-ass man who unironically calls himself Dark Might is the best antagonist out of all of My Hero movies. What fucking timeline am I living in? Lastly, there's the action, which is just... oh my god, it's all over my monitor. Easily the best it's ever been. Believe it or not, they actually managed to again increase the spectacle level from the previous film, but not at the cost of substance. It wasn't just bing bang boom bright colors, it was bing bang boom bright colors, but with actual choreography being thrown into the mix. They made full use of the environment, skill expression, and the various different quirks from both the villains and the heroes, which resulted in what I can only describe as pure unfiltered cinema. Yeah, I said the thing. There's not really much else I can say beyond that. It's a really good movie. Definitely go check it out when you've got time. And with that, we have officially covered every single My Hero Academia movie that has ever been released, at least for now. A surprisingly positive note to end the video on. I started this video with the intention of making fun of My Hero Academia. It seemed like an easy dunk that would make for some good content. While there were definitely some very low points through my journey, I can't exactly say I had a horrible time. Something I realized from this is that I don't actually hate My Hero Academia. I thought I did, but now I'm not entirely sure if I can say that with full confidence anymore. I enjoyed seeing these characters again. I smiled and laughed while they interacted, fought side by side, and while I do still have some problems with the series as a whole, it seems like my resentment never reached a point where I couldn't let loose and enjoy myself. I don't know, maybe a second, more open-minded look at the manga and its ending is worth looking into. That's a story for another day though. I think I reached my limit on how much My Hero content I can consume for a good while, so I'm probably just going to take a break and try to put this whole experience behind me. Anyway, yeah, that's all. Bye.